and welcome to another episode of We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I'll be your host for November because Christmas is coming. It's exciting. The old man's getting fat. I think there's a rhyme in that. I have no idea. But maybe the old man's getting fat because we're going to be maybe feeding some carnivores, maybe some dinosaurs, some vicious velociraptors or T-Rexes, because we're going to be talking about, on Kickstarter right now, it's Dino World, which is a dinosaur-themed roll and write game, which is coming all the way from Alley Cat Games. And joining me to have a little chat about it, I've got David Turczi, I've got James O'Connor, and I've got Nick Shaw. And this is going to be actual carnage. So, good evening, gentlemen. Hello to you all.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
It's good to have you all. I know this is all a bit kind of last minute, potentially a little bit ramshackle, but the campaign launched today, and it is already not only funded, but it's already funded, and then a huge kind of chunk of change on top of that, which I'm sure the three of you are all very kind of excited about. For people who haven't listened to us before, thank you for coming along and listening to us. The reason that we do this is because there's quite simply not enough podcasts out there about board games, and there's quite simply not enough people out there who have done like far too many episodes and just cannot be stopped and must be stopped at the same time. And the second reason that we do this is Caezar is a friend of the show, and he actually said he didn't want to come back on. He said, I've got three guys that could maybe come on the show and talk about the Kickstarter instead. So, like the fool that I am, I said yes, basically.
But it does take all three of us to make up for Caezar.
It does.
Very true.
Yeah, you're kind of right. You're kind of right like that. Tell me, I mean, we're going to talk about the game. I have said kind of in the green room, which everybody is obviously sitting in this imaginary green room waiting to talk with their lovely cups of teas and coffees and wonderful plate of biscuits. Except if you're James and you're at work. But how did the game kind of originally kind of come around? I know that it was you. Is it James? Were you the first person that kind of came up with the idea originally?
Yes. So the game kind of originated as a much larger game, kind of like a giant table-eating monstrosity that was inspired by both Jurassic Park and also a computer game from the 90s called Dino Park Tycoon. We were... a buddy of mine were actually trying to develop more of a economic simulator management game where you're building this humongous park, and we tested it and iterated on it, but the feedback we got from publishers was it was too much of a simulation than a game. So we iterated on it a couple of times, turned it from that into a tile placement, worker placement game, down into a dice game, and then kind of refined it more and more. And then when Gen Cant came around last year and they announced a roll and write contest, I said, well, if I've already condensed this game twice, why not do it one more time into an even smaller package and see if I can fit that whole giant table worth of stuff onto a single piece of paper. And that was kind of the genesis for the roll and write version of the game.
And of course, you had like Dinosaur Island kind of come around as well, and there's Dinogenics as well. So you must have been like, oh, theme parks better maybe do potentially something with lots of tiles and worker placement.
Yeah,
kind of stuff like that.
Yeah, we debuted the game at Origins in 2014, and that was where we kind of got the first feedback on it, and then it sat on the shelf for a while and kind of kept popping it back up again with a new iteration, some new ideas. But 2017 is when we really started getting into it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Is this the first game that you've designed, or have you been designing for a while then, James?
I've been designing games off and on since about 2013. This is my first game to come to Kickstarter, and it's only my third game that I've signed total. I have a couple others, one with Button Shy and one with Breaking Games, but this is my first one that's going to be coming to market in a big way.
Yeah, okay. Is it exciting to kind of get to that kind of get to that point with the game then? You're kind of saying, well, this is actually going to happen, and actually on Kickstarter just now with it being funded, it's definitely going to happen.
Yeah, I was actually holding my breath for the whole first 3 hours watching the numbers rise. I was like, oh gosh, what's it going to do? What's it going to do? Because I had no idea what to expect. So I was very nervous. I've watched a lot of campaigns from the outside, but never from the inside, and it's a whole different experience for sure.
Yeah. Did you, as you being part of like the creationary team, do you guys all have access to Kickstarter, to kind of like the console? Do you all have like your individual logins to get access to see kind of what's happening?
Yes. Well, I do.
Yep.
I don't know if the other two can be trusted.
we're all collaborators, I think, on it.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So you can kind of get get access to it. So how did you end up bumping into these other two kind of handsome fellas then, James? I mean, how did you end up? Because it sounded like, it sounded like Dino World itself was kind of ready to go. So how did you end up kind of getting involved with Caezar and getting involved with David and Nick?
That's a great question. So I shopped the game around quite a bit after Gen Cant when it won the contest there, and we had Gen Cant, and everyone got the chance to see it and play it. I showed it to several publishers, and then it kind of just sat on the back burner for a while. It never really, there was interest, but no one actually was ready to put forward a contract. So it sat there for about a year. Kind of just forgotten about it. I thought, well, I guess, it had its little moment in the sun, and that's probably good enough, I guess. And then Caezar kind of contacted me out of the blue on Twitter saying, hey, I just found out about this game Dino World. Is that still a thing? Is it still out there? And I was like, well, as a matter of fact, it is. Let's talk about it. And so I started talking with Caezar. He was very interested in the game. He had a lot of great ideas and visions for it. I was very excited to be, getting back into it after having sat there for about a month. And so when Caezar said he wanted to bring it on, he said that he also had a couple other designers that had some really great ideas, a lot of good roll and write experience, and he wanted to kind of leverage their skills and talents to kind of help bring the game into its full potential. And so that's kind of where these two gentlemen started joining the show, and it's been a pleasure working with them ever since.
Okay. Was it kind of weird knowing that you might be, after having invested so much time in the game, that you're going to be potentially handing over some of the kind of the creative control of it to other people, kind of thing?
Yes and no. So, there's always that designer fear of like, this is my baby. I don't know what they're going to do to it. But at the same time, like, I felt like I had done as much to the game as I could by myself. I kind of iterated on it and iterated on it and iterated on it. And I felt like it was changing, but it wasn't necessarily getting better. So I felt like it really needed some outside influence, some fresh ideas to kind of help it fully come into its own. And also, after having seen it not really go very anywhere after a year, I was like, well, if they're going to take it and go in a direction, at least it's a direction that's forward, and it's not going to just stay in the shadows like it is now and turn into a fossil. Yeah. So I was kind of interested to see, any direction they wanted to take it. I was willing to go along for the ride and see where it went. But I'm very happy where it ended up.
Yeah. So what about yourself, Nick? I mean, how did you end up kind of coming to the table in this kind of venture?
So I think David was brought on by Caezar to advise on how to improve the game and make it more of a medium weight game, which is what Caezar wanted to kind of pitch it as. And I've worked with David a lot on a number of his previous projects on playtesting and advising on the solo modes. And so he's brought me on for this because of my work with solo, but also because I've also played a lot of roll and write games.
Whereas I have never.
And David hasn't. So, so I was there kind of as David's advisor.
Oh, right. So he kind of so Caezar brought David in and said, right, okay, so you're going to help us with the roll and write bit, and you're going to help us with the solo bit, and then the next thing, 5 minutes later, you're getting a text.
Indeed, yeah.
Which is like, help!
That's literally what happened, although it wasn't a text, it was a meet and greet at UK Games Expo. But yes, basically, I said the theme is nice, the drawing little Tetris blocks of dinosaurs is nice, we need more choices. Also, I
Right,
don't know how a good roll and write feels like, so how about I bring on somebody else who has played one of those ever?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then Caezar said, sure.
So, I mean, what kind of other roll and write games have you been involved in then, Nick?
I did my own design for Gen Con as well. It didn't win any prizes, but I did do it. That was exciting.
Yeah.
And I playtested quite a few of those as well. I have played some other roll and writes as well, things like Octodice, and others in that vein. So I knew a lot about the kind of things that you would do in a roll and write with dice manipulation and the writing on the sheets and what exactly you do on the sheets and what should be represented on those, and that kind of thing. And that was, it was an interesting opportunity, I think.
So were you preventing people from making? Were you preventing the other two rather than people from making the obvious kind of schoolboy errors when they were ploughing in and saying, "Well, let's do this," and it's like, "Well, you can't do that because of, X, Y, Z. It unbalances stuff, or it doesn't."
Sort of, yeah.
Work.
I mean, it's not so much that I was stopping them from doing certain mechanics or something, but more advising other ways that you could implement certain features and the ways that you could get the players involved in the gameplay. So it's not a simple Yahtzee style, just roll dice, choose something, roll dice again, but actually making more interesting decisions with what you're doing with those dice.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for people that haven't played roll and write before, I mean, you're probably the best person to ask what makes a roll and write. What is our roll and write, Nick? That doesn't make a sentence, but
it's a very interesting question because it's not actually a mechanic on Board Game Geek. It's kind of grown organically over the last few years. Generally, a roll and write game is a game where you roll some dice. You do something with those dice to write things physically onto a player sheet or a shared sheet of paper. So you've got a pencil and you're actually writing permanently onto these sheets, and you have a whole pad of sheets that you'll use, one per game. They lend themselves nicely a lot of the time to having a lot of players. So a lot of roll and writes. If you have enough sheets, you could play in theoretically unlimited number of players. Which people have done, like Rado did his run through of Avenue on his channel, where he got watchers to play along with him, and so that's the kind of thing you can do with roll and writes there.
So it's kind of more. You don't have to worry about the components as much as long as you've got a pencil and there's enough space in the pad. Relatively,
that's right.
Get
so
a
you
lot
have
more people kind of playing. Yeah.
So you just need the dice and a copy of the sheet. Sometimes you just need one person to have the dice, and then you just have everyone else can have a sheet, and then you share that, and it just works like that. There are some other extensions of the roll and write genre, which are uses cards rather than dice. So things like Welcome To, which is a recent popular one, where you flip the cards. And the cards have some kind of dice-based like thing on them, and Avenue does that as well, where you have cards as well that you're flipping, and they're often called something like Flip and Fill or like that. So you can have. There are different things that you can do in the genre.
Okay. Do you think there's an attraction with that because kind of the roll and write kind of genre doesn't rely on having multiple massive numbers of kind of components and kind of production?
I think so. Yeah,
in order to kind of make it work.
I think it's very popular, especially because of the portability of the games, where you can take a sheet of paper and a few dice, and that's all you need. You always have a pencil on you, you can take it on holiday. You can take it to down to the pool to play, things like that. It's very portable games. They're very often small boxes, so they don't take up much space, and so I think that's why they're quite popular.
Yeah, I've actually seen pictures of people who have been playing it in the park. They've taken it to libraries and done it with large groups of people at conventions. Yeah. It's very popular for that reason, because of the unlimited player count and the portability, like Nick mentioned.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I mean, David, you've been involved in a couple of kind of well-known kind of bigger games. I mean, Anachrony kind of being being one of them. Was it a bit of a challenge for you to kind of approach this, maybe knowing that you couldn't say, okay, we could have this deck of cards, or let's bring some additional components kind of in? Were you having to look at things from a slightly different perspective from the kind of the design point of view when you were looking at this game?
Well, I mean, if I ever design a roll and write from scratch, and I do plan on doing that, I know I will struggle with keeping it on the low end. On this game, I had the luxury of somebody doing the legwork, and all I had to do was play it and say how would I do the exact same thing better, as in what I would add to make it tougher choice, more fluent, less random, etc. You know, things we consider improvements.
Yeah.
So really, all I asked was, because the original game was just dice and paper, all I asked was, can I get one deck of cards?
Yeah.
And Caezar said yes, and I was like, all right, I promise not to ask for more than one deck of cards.
Has David been sneaking stuff in?
Yes,
to the design
and the
process?
others have been sneaking them out.
That's right, yep.
I mean, I was actually quite surprised that there are only 3 dice in the game, because the last time I tried it, my version needed a lot more dice, and then they were like, nah, we don't need that. This is simpler this way. People will like it more.
You can just imagine it's kind of like, David, what's that? It's a diplodocus, and it's a brachiosaur, and David, do they need to be 3 inches high? Well,
beautiful miniatures.
I thought they added kind of
to be honest, because the first thing that people know about me is Anachrony, which is obviously huge on the table and 10 billion chits. They assume that every game I make wants to be 10 billion chits, which as lovely it feels, is only true for the games I do with the publisher of Anachrony, because that's the sort of games they like. Whereas for me, the core thing is that everything that's in the game has to involve a strategic choice. I can do A and move in direction 1, or I can do A and move in direction 2, or I could do a B and do something completely different with it. And the small game will have 1 or 2 A's and B's with 1 or 2 directions, and the big game, like Anachrony, will have 10 A's and B's with 1 or 2 directions each. So everything needs to be there for at least 2 reasons, and usually no more than 3 reasons, so 2 or 3 reasons, and everything should influence your long term strategy, and everything should have a risk, either a risk reward or a short term, long term trade off. So when I looked at James's original design, to go back to the exact example, and it was roll a bunch of dice, look at your menu of dinosaurs and roads, pick some dinosaurs and some roads, throw them in, and then roll some dice to see which one of them breaks out. I said, I need 3 things. I need to care about certain dinosaurs more or less at different points of the game. Those turned into the visitor cards. I need different strategies to appear in different games that turned into the lab cards and the special building cards. And I need to be able to control the risk of the dinosaurs breaking out, and that turned into the security track. So I was more like the executive producer saying, I need a change in that direction, and then I gave a first idea to Nick. Nick tried it out. He said it works. He showed it to Caezar and James, and they said it's too complicated. and then they hacked 2/3 of it out. Then I screamed at them for a week saying, you hacked too many things out. And then they put 10% back, and then took 5% off, and then took 1% back, and then that was the game.
James, at the same time, are you trying to make sure that you're maintaining the original vision, the original idea of the game? I mean, are you still trying to kind of say, well, I kind of like having that there. Can we not just have that there? Thanks.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, there's definitely an element to that. The game it won the Roll and Write contest for a reason. People played the original Gen Cant version and they liked it. I got a lot of positive feedback. There were some definitely broken parts to it for sure. And so it definitely needed some development. I think the things I wanted to maintain the most were, the pictographic example of drawing your park, actually seeing it, putting the dinosaurs in there in these little polyhedral shapes and
no point was I trying to remove that.
No, nobody was, because I think everybody all liked it too. But it was definitely a touchstone for me. Being able to draw your park, I really wanted the ability to have it be playable with any number of people. At one point, we were kind of looking at maybe scaling it down, saying, "Okay, this is going to be at max 9 or 8 or 9 people." And I was like, "No, we have to have the unlimited player sheet function. I mean, people want to play this in large groups. We want to play it in small groups. People want to play it with solo." So I really wanted to try and maintain that. But I definitely saw that there were areas where it could be improved, like getting more player interaction, like the visitor cards, stuff like that. Those were really necessary improvements that I was like, okay, I played with this for months, a year or so. Let's see where we can go from a new ideas perspective.
Yeah. I've seen that a lot with what I call being kind of too close to the coalface, where somebody bangs on about having to have a mechanic in a game. And then you remove that mechanic just to try it, just to see if it gives something differently, if it pushes the game in a new direction. And sometimes it can open up something a little bit more exciting, something a little bit more accessible. Sometimes it obviously kind of doesn't kind of always work. So I'm guessing that, you're all working in kind of like different kind of time zones as well. Has it been Is that made it a little bit more challenging that you can't all just kind of rock? I mean, just now, let's face it, it is about 5 to 10. I'm guessing it's obviously going to be an awful lot earlier for James. It's going to be around about the same time for me and Nick, and I'm guessing it's potentially even a little bit later for David. But
I'm actually in London. I don't live in Hungary.
All right, okay, then no, I got that wrong.
But yeah, it is 3 o'clock in the afternoon here.
Well, there you go.
In Denver.
There you go. So, well, there you go. And obviously, David's on London time anyway, so that could be any time at all.
Yes. Plus, I'm not certain whether it would take me less time to fly to Denver or take the train down to Nick.
It's true.
It depends what kind of train service you're getting at the moment. And no doubt a lot of them are going to be cancelled because of the wrong leaves that are kind of on that are kind of on the line kind of going forward. But is that made? I mean, even with you, kind of, do you get a chance to kind of? Have you had any chances to have any face to faces? Has it all been set in kind of like a virtual kind of office environment?
I don't think I've ever met James in person. James, have I met you in person?
No, unfortunately, no. I've not had the pleasure of meeting any of these gentlemen. We've done it all remotely, and it has been interesting for sure. I tell my wife, hey, honey, I have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning this morning so I can have my international business call. It makes me sound so important. But a lot of times, what I'll do is, in the evenings when I get home, these guys are already way in bed, and so I'll play the game. I'll do some research. I'll type up some notes. I'll drop like 4 or 5 comments into our shared chat, and I'll just be like, well, I wonder what these guys are going to think about this in the morning. And then I'll go to bed, and then I'll wake up, and I'll turn on my phone, and there's 500 messages from all of them going back and forth. And I'm like, okay, gotta catch up. And then like they'll start a conversation, have a whole discussion about it, and come to a decision. I'm like, well, I'm glad I wasn't part of that.
I always thought it was not be able to get a bit passive aggressive where you change stuff but don't actually tell the other people that you've changed
Not
stuff.
that I'm aware of, so if they snuck it in, they did a good job.
I mean, which is why I was happy that Nick was the holder of the files, because his patience is a saint. So whenever I got fed up or disagreed with the others or anything, then it was just like, so this is what I wanted to do something with it, bye. And then come back the next day and look at what they agreed on, and then go like, shit, it's actually not bad. Sorry, beep, it's actually not bad what they come up with.
You can't see that. What's the point of doing that? You can't see that and then go beep.
Oh, you can edit it.
Oh, right, okay. So you give me... Now I've got editing to do. Thanks, David. That's so... If only I could go back in time. There's no way you can spend your resources now to give them back earlier on in this game, I'm afraid, sir. If you don't kind of mind. But then, I mean, was it up to like someone like yourself, Nick, to kind of maybe collaborate kind of everything together? Were you the kind of still kind of having the sanity check on everything, being the kind of the roll and write expert and saying, okay, yeah, all these ideas, I recommend we do this, I recommend we kind of do that? Were you kind of...
In a way, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would take the ideas that David and James had brought along, and that Caezar and himself and his development guys as well have brought along. I would try those out. I would subtly change them a bit here and there to try and balance things. I'd write up all the notes. I'd write comments to say why I've changed various bits, and then they would feed back comments to me, and I would iterate on that. And eventually it would then come out with a new version, which then everyone then starts playtesting. And so that was the kind of the process.
Okay. And what about you? I mean, yourself, David. I mean, are you having to fight the kind of the process, trying not to continually add kind of extra things in, kind of all the time? Is this is this giving you ideas to doing your own kind of own roll and write now, kind of even more, or are you just going to say, right, I'm happy I've done this roll and write, I've been involved in this one?
Well, there were two questions there. The one about the process. I mean, at the heat of the moment, it was frustrating to be overridden, but in the long term, it was like all of this was for the benefit of the game. So I was happy that we went through that, because if I felt about something very strongly, then by me telling it again and again, the others, and not just Nick and James, but Caezar's team paid more weight to testing other options. And even if those testing didn't agree with me, it did end up finding something better. So the extra laps were usually worth it. And because I trust Nick, because that's why I brought him on board, and he played it about 1 billion times more than I have. So when he tells me that, the current version works, then I'm not gonna go and saying, but the other one was my idea and let's use it, because, it's not about the ego, it's about making the best game. Your other question was, what have I learned for my own future roll and write game? Right now, I'm just worried that my own roll and write game will be extremely unsuccessful, because I don't want it to scale for any number of players. I don't want it to be playable in the park. So now I'm like, nobody will like my game.
So is this what you're going to do at the last minute? You're going to come in and sabotage a few things on He's like, oh, somebody deleted the Kickstarter campaign. Who was that? You see David running off into the distance, laughing hysterically.
Very, very funny, but unfortunately, I'm a bit more on the professional side for that.
We'll see. Time will tell. Let's get into the game itself, okay? Because obviously there's no point in us having this conversation. It's the same. This is how I work. We do half an hour of chat, and then we actually decide to tell everybody what the game's about in the first place. James, because this is your baby, do you want to, for people that are listening so far, and God bless everybody for listening so far, and after David's terrible ranty swear that he had.
Thank you.
Oh, nice. I can edit you, James, you want to tell us about Dino World? I mean, how you play it, the kind of the base mechanics for people that are kind of listening and, are interested.
Sure, definitely. So it is a medium weight roll and write game. All you need is the pad of paper, pencil, and a deck of cards and a couple of dice, and that all comes in the box. And what you're going to do is, for a small group game, you're going to throw out some visitor cards between all the players, and those are the kind of the goals you're setting for yourself. Like, I want to have this number of dinosaurs, I want to have these kind of features in my park. And so that gives you kind of a starting direction of something you want to do. Then every turn you're going to roll the 3 dice, and that's going to give you some numbers that you can use in your park. You can use numbers to build dinosaurs. You can use numbers to build buildings. and you can use numbers to draw paths inside the park. Paths are important because you're going to need to go from the entrances that are pre-printed on the map to the dinosaurs that you put into your park eventually. So obviously, if the visitors can't get to the dinosaurs to see them, they don't do you any good. So you will be drawing. We have 6 dinosaurs that are in the basic game, and so you'll be drawing those. They're all in different sizes. You can choose the size and shape of the pen based on the values that are printed on there, and so you'll choose a dinosaur, put it in there, make sure it's connected to the paths, add buildings that'll give you special abilities or bonuses, and then after all that's done, you will go and check and see if the dinosaurs have escaped in the let me back up 1 second. So we do have 2 versions of the game. There's the light mode, which is exactly what I just described, and then that's the end of the round. And then we have a danger mode, which is all of that plus now the chance of dinosaurs escaping. So, so that's where the dinosaurs kind of fight back a little bit. So if you're playing the danger mode, then you'll check and see, okay, based on the statistics of my park, based on how much threat I've added by adding certain dinosaurs and how much security I've invested into my park, I'm going to roll some dice and see, okay, this is how these dinosaurs are going to behave, and this is whether or not they do damage to their pens and possibly break out, damaging other pens, which can lead to cascading breakouts. So there's a little bit of a push your luck. You're trying to conserve resources. You're trying to make sure that your park is secure, but not overly secure, because putting too much money and time into security costs money and time, and you need to use that for other things. And so that's kind of the general cycle of a round. So everybody plays at the same time. You're all going to be using the same dice. So at the end of the game, you're all going to have wildly different parks, but you all use the same values to get there. So it lends itself to a lot of comparison.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can say, oh, well, this is what I did when we got those values. I used it to build this Brachiosaurus over here. Oh, well, I used it to build lots of paths. So you can say I have these branching paths over here. So that's another one of the original features of the game that I wanted to make sure was preserved, was that everyone was working off of a shared pool that lent commonality between the parks.
So as the game progresses, basically organically, there might not necessarily be a strategy that evolves, because it's random based around the dice rolls, but then it's also going to be random based around what people decide to do at that kind of certain time. So that naturally obviously gives its own sense of replayability for the game as well, yeah? Yeah,
definitely. So you'll have these goals that are put out with the visitor cards that say, okay, I want to have 4 Brachiosaurs in my park by the time it ends. So you will be kind of using the random dice that you get with some manipulation abilities that you can unlock to try and get to the values that you need to complete your goals. But you're also a little bit at the whim of the randomness of the dice. But because everyone is sharing those dice, it makes for a very smooth playing, very common experience, so that everyone is no one gets kind of messed over by the dice, so to speak.
Okay. With it being the structure that it's in, does that mean that the 3 of you have been able to look at kind of expansions, different scenarios and stuff like that as well, kind of bringing in different variations of the game and things like that?
Definitely.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything that say yourself, Nick, is that, with you being the kind of the roll and write expert, and I'm going to keep coming back to you as the roll and write expert, like the BBC would do if they were interviewing somebody about roll and write. But again, have you been able to give guidance about kind of what's expected in kind of different iterations of the game, what potentially could be expansions, like what would kind of work and things like that?
I certainly have. I've suggested certain things that could be added later on as expansions. As something that James has always said early on, is that we can always add more dinosaurs to do different things. Different dinosaurs can have different threat. They can have slightly different mechanics, possibly. And then I've been adding in things like other special buildings and different research labs, which allow you to do various, break the rules slightly in various ways. So I have been doing that, but it's been very much a collaborative process, I think, with everyone suggesting their own ideas, and I've just kind of collating them and trying to kind of reality check all those suggestions into something that will actually work.
For yourself, David, was working on kind of looking at kind of different expansions and things like that. Was that a different approach to how you would have looked at kind of expansions to, say, for an example, for Anachrony, for instance?
I don't think comparing the development and the expansion process of this game to Anachrony would be fair for either game.
It doesn't weigh 30 pounds. It doesn't make the cut.
You're joking, but also you're not joking. So basically, the way I approached potential expansions for Dino World, and I think all of my ideas ended up on the we'll get back to later, nice try, buddy pile, was that what else could I do on my turn that somehow benefits to my game and somehow doesn't take away from building the park. And I think the only one that I actually protoed and sent to Nick died because it was either you use it and then you gain some and then you miss an action somewhere else, or you don't use it and then what's the point of having it here? So yes, this is a very interesting case study for me because I can't just add 10 more things to it and thus justify the other 9. But once I catch up and play the final version with all the advanced bits that the guys have been playtesting the past few weeks, which unfortunately I completely missed, then I hope to get inspired again. And if Caezar wants to get back to this project in the future or in any way, then I'll be here annoying the beep out of them.
Yeah, and we are definitely including a couple of expansions in the Kickstarter campaign that's going on right now. So we've got in the map of the park, there's a lake in the center of it, and that was kind of meant to kind of give the terrain some feeling of like, I can go this direction, but not that direction. Kind of meant to be an obstacle to give it a little bit more organic sense. But we're actually using that park now to build aquatic dinosaurs. So you can actually draw different kinds of dinosaurs into the lake or expand the lake. And then another expansion we're also including is aviaries to include flying dinosaurs. And Nick's done a really great job of taking those initial ideas and really developing them into something usable. And also Caesar's team, I know Bez was involved in those as well.
Yep.
I mean, in terms of like stretch goals, I mean, let's jump into stretch goals because you're going to hit some. I mean, you've probably already hit some already. Is that another side of things that did you have to consider them when you were putting together the campaign, or have you just said, well, tell you what, let's see what happens with the campaign first, and then let's panic and start throwing some stretch goals together?
We could tell you, but we'd have to kill you.
That's fine. If you take the train, that'll give me enough time to kill. Probably give me enough time to get away and retire, actually, to be perfectly honest. But
so stretch goals were, we did discuss them. We've been discussing for quite a while now about what we could add in for stretch goals. And the usual things you add in for stretch goals is improved components, maybe larger components. And I think a lot of those are going to come out of the stretch goals. I don't know what the final list is yet because I've not seen it because it's all hidden on the Kickstarter page. But we have a kind of a master list of possible things to add in for stretch goals.
Yeah, we've been throwing everything in that, to the mundane of, this could be a different color, or these could be slightly larger, to the absolute extreme of like including real life fossils in every game. So we've definitely explored a lot of different avenues, and ultimately I think it's going to be up to Caesar on what he thinks are viable.
Yeah, I mean, Alley Cat Games has been kind of carving a nice little niche for itself as being, it's continually kind of rolling out these very successful games, and it's building itself a kind of an excellent kind of reputation for its, for itself as well. So I'm really interested to see what they do. I guess the other thing is as well is the funding goal itself isn't that high. But again, there's always this question about funding goals sometimes being artificially made low to make kind of games kind of fund. But obviously you've doubled the kind of the target. I mean, were you surprised when you funded, or did you think, well, we're going to fund, but it's just a question of when? Have you been surprised by how quickly you've kind of funded?
I think I've certainly was surprised. It was with just shy of 3 hours it funded in. I thought maybe it might fund in 24 hours, depending on how popular it is. I mean, we've got a lot of followers on the Facebook group for the game, and there's a lot of fans of the game on Board Game Geek, but you don't know how many that translates into will actually buy a physical copy of the game. So yes, we've got over, I think, 600 backers now. Within that time is quite amazing.
I know myself personally, since I didn't have a lot of experience being on the inside of a Kickstarter, I didn't know what to expect going in. I wasn't sure if it would fund at all, because I looked at some of the other campaigns that Alleycat has done. They've had much lower turnouts. I've looked at similar roll and writes that had much lower levels. I tried to kind of temper my expectations. Well, if we get to our funding goal, then that's going to be enough. At least people will get the backers will get it in their hands and will be out in the wild. But I had the secret hope that maybe this would explode. But when it funded in 3 hours, I was blown away. I was absolutely over the moon. I did not expect it to go that quickly, for sure.
And for you, David, is it kind of strange looking at like a game like this and reaching like reach 16,000, where something like Anachrony was like did 6 figures, did huge amounts?
I mean, each game has a price point, has an expected number of backers based on the publisher's reach, as in marketing firepower, other selling points, etc., etc. And then you multiply those two numbers up, and then that tells you how much money you hope to get. And then you set a number which is both big enough to fund your production and small enough to hopefully fund in a day or two max. Because Kickstarter reacts weirdly to projects not funding in the first day or two. Everybody assumes it's doom and gloom.
What are your thoughts on that? David, having some experience, obviously, in the Kickstarter space now.
I've been backing games since 2012. Back in 12 and 13, this was not how Kickstarter worked. Now it is. Yeah. Deal with it. To me, it just means that if you think your project's gonna make 70 grand, then set your funding to 10-ish grand, so that you fund in the first day, and then using the rule of 40, 30, 30, you're gonna get enough money to make it to 70. If you think your project will fund 500,000, then set your funding target to, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 grand, and you'll still hit it in a few hours. Because if you don't, then your project will not make 500,000, and then you probably mispriced the whole thing, and you should go back to the drawing board. So this is just product development, and I've now done this twice with Mindclash games. Obviously, those are the biggest, because out of the publishers I work with, they have the biggest games and the biggest reach, so multiply those numbers, you get very big ones. But I've done it a few more times with other publishers as well. I got another campaign going on right now, which I wasn't going to talk too much about, because this is Alleycat's time to shine. But, it's all about managing your own expectations, and I'm very happy with how Dino World is doing, and I'm very glad I could help James bring out his dream to the big world, because I remember how it was for me in 2013. The first game of mine got published, and that made 57 grand on Kickstarter for a big-ish box game, which in today's world would be a horrible disappointment, but back then it was like, oh my god, my dreams are coming true.
And I mean, for instance, for yourself, Nick, have you got kind of games yourself that you're kind of wanting to bring out yourself? Does this encourage you to say, well, I'm going to start kind of putting together some more of my own stuff and getting that kind of out there, using kind of working with Caezar and things like that? Certainly.
I think it has pushed me to think it's worth trying to pitch some of my designs to publishers. I haven't done this before, pitching to publishers, simply because I haven't had the time to invest in doing that. But it's I think it's encouraged me to pursue that more.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of kind of going forward for someone like yourself, James, does that encourage you to say, well, I mean, I'm guessing there's a pile of other games that you would like to get created. I mean, normally games designers don't just have the one game kind of sitting in the background. So is that giving you the confidence to think, well, there's other things I can now bring to the table? Or has it made you think, well, actually, maybe collaboration is the kind of the way going forward?
Well, I think I got kind of lucky in this particular example of having two great guys to collaborate with. We had a very good working relationship of putting ideas and respecting each other's ideas, working together to kind of come up with a good solution. I'm not 100% sure I would have such a good experience again with other people, just because I've never done it before. Outside these guys, I don't know if I'm spoiled or if this is the norm, but I do know it's been an enjoyable experience. I would be very open to having another collaborative experience. But like you said, I do have a pile of designs, and I'm bringing several of them with me to Philadelphia this November for PAX Unplugged, where I'll be pitching to several publishers. But I also hope to work with Alleycat again in the future on some more ideas for their line.
Whereas this is where I can definitely say that for me it's all about the collaboration all the time. I got something like 7 or 8 games out and like a bunch more coming, and I think all but 2 of them are co-designs at this point, as in past and present and future included. Yeah. So to me, it's having different kind of collaborators because everybody learns from everybody. And Nick started as one of the many playtesters on one of my games, God knows how many months or years ago. And now I am planning at least one more game to be designed with him. Right, Nick?
Yep, that's right.
It's just kind of like, he's not agreed to me yet, but if I get him to say it on air, at least there'll be at least 4 people that have heard it happen.
He already booked the train ticket, so he either wastes 20 hours of travel or he gets a game out of it.
I know it's James's, but what's the game that you've kind of got out at the moment, David?
It's called Imperium, and it's by NSKN Games, and it's a civilization deck builder game for the 1 to 4 players, and Nick will be playtesting the solo mode as of next week. So,
Nick, do you know this? Is this you do? Yep. Are you got the coffee and the sandwiches in?
Exactly.
In the big kind of notebook.
I'm just waiting for him to finish the testing the last bits of the Dino World expansion, and then as soon as he's finished, then
I do. I'm all prepped for it.
Under my thumb. and then
I know
the next project of my own will probably actually be the Anachrony expansion, which is I know what everybody is super excited about. But Dice Settlers will get an expansion first. That will happen first in January. So that was my big release this Essence. So ask me about it some other time.
Are you doing Petrichor as well?
Yes, Petrichor is Dave Kirkhope's game, and again I improved it and then made some expansions for it, and we had a giant bee at our booth in Essen. I was even dressed up as a bee. You can find the pictures online.
I gotta see that.
You were I've seen that picture because you were at the Essen meetup, and you think you still had the bee costume on, didn't you?
That was somebody else whom I borrowed the bee costume from. So that's not how I look. That's a different person.
That's a different person.
But yes, I was there. That's where I got the idea from.
Oh, fantastic! But as you said, you've got Petrichor expansion, Dice Settlers as well, as you said in that career.
And then towards the summer, a couple of new games, not just expansions. I do have new ideas occasionally.
Pocket Dragon
is shipping, but there was a lot of help from my wife, so that was special.
It's all good. See, it's not just about Anachrony. Caezar said, "I'll just talk to David about Anachrony because he loves talking about Anachrony all the time." Basically, that's not true. It could be true. It's kind of true. For people who are interested in getting in the door, how much is it going to cost them to pick themselves up a copy of Dino World?
The cheapest pledge is £21, which is just the base game, or £29 for the water dinos and the solo mode and everything else. So
yeah, and you've gone for a very, very short time kind of campaign as well.
Nah, 16 days is not short these days. I've been part of 14 and 12-day campaigns as well. So
all right, okay.
Anything above 28 is considered unreasonably long these days.
I don't know. It gives me enough time to look towards payday when I know I can
since
you gotta keep that campaign momentum up.
I know.
Yeah, that too. And since Kickstarter takes 2 weeks to charge your credit card maximum, there is no way to not hit one more payday unless you're running a 5-day campaign. So the fact that campaigns have to tick over a payday is an urban legend that is not true. And every time we run a campaign that doesn't tick over a month, I have to tell it to everybody, saying, no, don't worry. If at the end of the campaign you're a bit short, then Kickstarter will retry charging you 5 days later and then 5 days later again. So it's fine.
So good.
So yeah,
it's
short campaigns are the future.
Good. Well, as I say, we've got by the time this comes out, we'll have about 2 weeks left. You are sitting at almost £17,000. And as I say, it's £21 to get in at the Velociraptor value, which is just a fantastic. It's £29 if you want to come in at the tremendous Tyrannosaurus Rex. That's not so good a name, but it's fine. And you get all the extra goals, the Aviary expansion, the aquatic expansion, the one-player automata, and the 6 months exclusivity after release. We'll make sure that we put the link for the campaign in the show notes so that we have notes to show. If people have listened along today and they like what they've heard and they like to kind of keep an eye on you gentlemen to see what you're up to on the interweb nets, where do we find you on the interweb nets, David?
Board Game Geek is the obvious easiest. Other than that, I'm very active in a number of Facebook groups. The UK chat, the big one, the all capitals one, and exposure and spotlight. So I am usually happy to reply to random requests. So if anybody wants to hunt me down, I'm easy to find.
Type up a random request just now. What about you, Nick?
I'm on Board Game Geek as NJ Shaw 2, if you want to find me there. I am on Twitter as the same name as well, although I don't post much on Twitter. And again, I'm on a number of those Facebook groups as well, if you want to come and find me there.
Cool. And finally, James, what about your good self?
Hey, I'm definitely active on Twitter as much as I can be. They're on at Stellaris Games, Stellaris, Stellaris Games, and on BGG as Astrium Rex.
Cool. Excellent. You can find us in the usual haunts and places. We're on Facebook at We're Not Wizards, Twitter at We're Not Wizards, Instagram at We're Not Wizards, YouTube, We're Not Wizards Tabletop Podcast. We have a website, which is we'renotwizards.com. We have a blog, which is we'renotwizards.blogspot.com. You can email us, magic@we'renotwizards.com. I am aware of the irony. That is why I picked the email address. You can find us on the usual podcast catchers, your Stitchers, your Spreakers, your Acasts, your Spotify's, potentially Deezer. We're just all over the place, Castbox, things like that. If you like what you've listened to, then please feel free to drop us a little rating on the podcast catcher where you catch your podcasts. If you like us even more, then please consider going to the Apple Podcast place and therein drop us a rating or a review or even a subscription. If you are going to drop us a rating or a review, remember, don't give us 10 stars because that makes us big-headed, but don't give us 1 because it makes me cry and I'm an ugly crier. Give us something in the middle, like a 5, because it's average and we are just a little bit average. But the people who have not been average tonight is rather fantastic. They're rather wonderful. I have Nick, I have James, and I have David. and we're off somewhere off in the distance, probably worrying, asking, I hope he's not asked a whole pile of stupid questions as Caezar from Cat Games as well. But gentlemen, thank you very, very much for coming on the show. It's been a lot of fun.
It's been a pleasure.
There are only 2 more things to do. The first thing is to remember that we are many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, gentlemen?
We are not.
Definitely not.
I can't confirm or deny it.
It's always one, eh? It's always one. I could guarantee I could have wrote that down, stuck it in an envelope like a magician, and pulled that out at the end and went, oh, is this the card you thought of? The ambivalent one.
But if you did that, you would be a wizard.
I would be. And I'm not. Or maybe I am. Check my Twitter profile. The truth is there. And the last thing is to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from the wonderful David. Say goodbye, David.
Goodbye.
It's a toodaloo from Nick.
Toodaloo.
And it's a you all come back now you hear from James.
You all come back now, you hear?
I can't believe he did that.
Yeah, make the American do it.
And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe, roll6s.com. And if you got yourself a pencil, if you got yourself a dice, if you got yourself a pad of paper, and you want to get all Jurassic, then check out Dino World. It's still out there. It's still funded. We'll stick a link in the show notes so you can hear that roar, as they would say. But until the next time, goodbye.
A wizard is never late. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.